The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
I want to congratulate you for what we have seen in the past 24 hours in Gaza.
Thank you.
I think it's a historic deal.
Historic peace. Phase 1 of the ceasefire in the Middle East takes effect, what that entails, and when the final hostages will be coming home.
I don't know what the big problem is. If I were a Democrat governor, I'd be saying, whatever you can do to get crime down, I'll take anybody.
Dueling hearings in 2 states today as local governments turn to the courts to stop President Trump from bringing federal troops and immigration agents to their streets. And then support for soybean farmers, what President Trump plans to do to assist the hurting industry, even while the government funding remains closed. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. Breaking news out of the Middle East. The Israeli government is meeting right now and is expected they will ratify the agreed upon Phase 1 of the Donald Trump proposed peace plan tonight. Hamas has also agreed to accept that deal, meaning a full ceasefire will take place within 24 hours. Now, the president spoke about the historic deal this afternoon.
As you know, last night we reached a momentous breakthrough in the Middle East, something that people said was never going to be done. We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace.
Now, here's what is expected to happen in the coming days of Phase 1 of this ceasefire deal. IDF forces have 24 hours to withdraw to the Yellow Line, and troops' movements have already begun. The IDF will still be present in about 53% of Gaza. Within 72 hours, all hostages, dead and alive, are expected to be returned to Israel. At that time, Israel says they will release 250 life sentence prisoners, as well as 1,700 Gazan detainees from the war. And it's been 733 days that these hostages have spent in captivity. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has a look at the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza expected to be heading home.
They've been held in reportedly unimaginable conditions for more than 2 years, in underground tunnels, starved to within an inch of their life, physically abused and tortured.
It's really hard to believe that this moment is coming.
Now, as part of the peace deal between Israel and Hamas orchestrated by the White House, the remaining hostages are set to finally be released.
Getting them is a complicated process. I'd rather not tell you what they have to do to get them. There are places you don't want to be. Very importantly, the hostages are coming back.
Celebrations erupting in Israel's hostage square. 48 individuals taken by Hamas on October 7th remain in Gaza. Only 20 of those are believed to still be alive.
To those parents, the dead young man is just as important as though this person were alive.
We spoke with Avahai Braddock. His wife and 3 children were kidnapped on October 7th from their kibbutz. All of them survived and were in the first wave of hostages released after 51 days in Gaza.
They were starved. They all lost a lot of weight. They just looked terrible.
But his kibbutz is still waiting on the release of 2 hostages, Gali and Ziv Berman, twin brothers in their mid-20s, believed to still be alive.
This is a tremendous joy for our kibbutz. Now everybody's celebrating, but deep inside, we're still just waiting to see them and to get them back.
Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Michael Leiter warning there's still obstacles to getting all of the hostages out of Gaza.
They're not the only ones holding the hostages, both the living and the dead. There are 4 organizations, terror organizations, alongside of Hamas. So they have to be identified, they have to be found, and they have to be returned. But we're hoping that's all going to be able to be done in those 72 hours.
And Taylor, President Trump has announced he's planning a trip to the Middle East in the coming days, and he also says he expects all of the hostages to be released either early next week on Monday or Tuesday.
And Kayla, what more do we know about that possible upcoming trip to the region for President Trump? Where all will he go, and who is he expected to meet with?
So the president says he plans to personally sign the ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. That deal signing will happen in Egypt. Egypt hosted the negotiators for the final push of these ceasefire talks. The president has also mentioned the possibility of visiting Israel, but at this moment, that's not confirmed. Taylor.
In Washington, D.C., Kayla Gaskins, thank you. Now, meanwhile, the ceasefire agreed to covers just phase one. After the hostages and Israeli prisoners are exchanged, negotiations are expected to begin for phase two. Now, on the table is the future of Gaza, both its reconstruction as well as who will govern it. Also, yet to be decided is whether or not Hamas and their militant allies will disarm, as well as IDF's further withdrawal from the enclave. Just announced the U.S. will send about 200 troops to Israel to help support and monitor the ceasefire deal in Gaza. More breaking news tonight. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted on a fraud charge. A grand jury came to the decision today in the Eastern District of Virginia. The DOJ began investigating mortgage fraud allegations against James earlier this year, centering around a 2023 mortgage for a property in Virginia. James calls the indictment part of the president's, quote, desperate weaponization of our justice system. In other news now, high-stakes legal arguments over President Trump's effort to deploy National Guard troops on the streets of two American cities playing out simultaneously in federal courtrooms today. Both cases center on the president's authority to federalize troops against the will of state and local authorities. We start in Portland, where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is holding oral arguments on whether to lift a lower court's order blocking the deployment of troops into Portland. Now, according to the New York Times, judges seemed poised to clear the way for President Trump. A lower court ruling that found that Trump had exceeded his authority when he tried to federalize 200 members of the Oregon National Guard as well as the California Guard into Portland. Meanwhile, over in Chicago, a similar argument playing out in court. U.S. District Judge April Perry is considering the state of Illinois' request to temporarily block the president's deployment of troops from Texas who arrived earlier this week. Now, the New York Times, reports that Perry expressed a need to review documents and asked both sides to report back to court after an afternoon break. We know that they are back in court. She's reading a lengthy review right now. We're still waiting to hear the outcome because, again, right now it is not clear when either the appellate panel in Oregon or that federal Judge Perry in Chicago will rule. We will update you. With President Trump's immigration crackdown in the spotlight, the question behind the legal battles playing out in courts today is how far the president can go enforcing his agenda and involving military troops domestically. The National News Desk, Christine Frizzell, takes a look at a new poll.
The arrests have carried on across the country, on the streets, and at job sites. A strategy resulting in both protest and praise. A New York Times Siena poll finding that while a majority of Americans support deporting immigrants living in the United States illegally, a majority also say Donald Trump's actions on immigration enforcement have gone too far. Protests capturing the anger and frustration of the methods, especially most recently with the use of the National Guard being sent into cities like Chicago. Leaders there have called it unlawful and unnecessary.
Armed, masked men showing up with Black Hawk helicopters, sticking guns in the faces of Black women, zip-tying Black children, putting immigrants in one van, putting Black folks in another van. This is not what builds safety.
The Trump administration, though, celebrates what it refers to as hunting down and finding the worst of the worst. Over the last 9 months, sharing photos of some of their arrests. Among them, gang members, child sex offenders, and convicted murderers who had been released into the United States.
If we have to do it the hard way in Portland and Chicago, we will.
The White House appearing undeterred by legal challenges, pushing ahead with plans to leave National Guard troops in cities where leaders have told them they're not welcome.
We're purchasing more buildings in Chicago to operate out of. We're going to not back off. In fact, we're doubling down, and we're going to be in more parts of Chicago in response to the people there.
Legal arguments over sending in the National Guard played out in both Illinois and Oregon over the president's power to do this. The attorney for the state of Oregon called the president's assessment of the situation in Portland, quote, untethered from reality. An attorney for the federal government called the protesters violent people, said there's a risk of far more violence if they let their guard down. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The 29-year-old man suspected of starting that deadly Pacific Palisades fire will remain in jail without bail ahead of trial. A federal magistrate, judge in Florida ruling today after prosecutors expressed concerns about his mental health and past encounters with police. Jonathan Rinderknecht was arrested Tuesday, charged with malicious destruction by means of fire. According to authorities, ChatGPT evidence led them to the suspect after they say his personal devices contained AI images he generated depicting starting a fire in a city and people fleeing. Authorities said they also found other links between Rinderknecht and the fire on his phone, including videos that he had taken of firefighters trying to put out the flames. A hearing is set for October 17th. Officials said further charges, including murder, could follow. Well, 2 Miami police officers are in stable condition after being shot this morning while responding to reports of gunfire. One officer was shot in the knee, the other in the ankle, according to the Miami police chief. The incident prompted a massive law enforcement response and an hours-long standoff that ended with the armed suspect dead. Police did not confirm if the suspect died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound or from a bullet in the exchange with officers. And we do know a second individual was taken into custody in connection to this incident. Well, the San Francisco Police Department homicide detail is leading an investigation after 4 people were found dead in their home. Police say they were doing a well-being check on the family who lived there and found 4 bodies, 2 of them children. Police say crimes were committed in the house but did not provide further details, and the victims' identities have not been released yet. The search for 2 Virginia teenagers intensifies as the pair has been missing for nearly 6 weeks now. Authorities are searching for Zoe Robertson and Anthony Worth, last seen in the Appomattox, County around the 30th of August. Now, according to Robertson's mother, the 2 had a tendency to get into trouble and a no contact order was in place. The parents of both teenagers and investigators say they are deeply concerned for their safety and just want them to come home.
I hope to God that I'm able to see her again, and I can't imagine doing life without her.
Right now, first and foremost, it's to make sure that these guys are safe and to bring them home.
Take a look at your screen here. According to authorities, the teens are believed to be in the Philadelphia area after this video of them walking on the street was spotted on a security camera. The state of Kentucky is suing the online gaming platform Roblox, accusing it of being a playground for predators. Now, the lawsuit claims Roblox did not have effective safety measures allowing predators to target and groom children and didn't warn parents about the risk. Roblox says it has taken a number of steps to improve safety. Louisiana and Iowa have taken similar legal action. Coming up, the latest on the government shutdown and how it's affecting the Fed as policymakers weigh more interest rate cuts. Then the state that's become the first in the country to ban ultra-processed foods in school lunches. Plus, taxpayer money may have funded a top official's luxury vacations. The growing calls for California's insurance commissioner to resign. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Senate was once again unable to advance the House-passed continuing resolution to reopen the federal government. For the 7th time, Democrats defeated the measure. Axios is now reporting that Senate Majority Leader John Thune is considering bringing full-year appropriations bills to the floor for a vote to reopen agencies one at a time. This would include new funding for the Pentagon and the men and women of the military.
A handful of votes away from paying our troops. And we're going to see if that matters, the Democrats.
Each day, our case to fix health care and end the shutdown gets better and better, stronger and stronger, because families are opening their letters, showing how high their premiums will climb.
If the Senate does bring up individual budget bills, the House would have to reconvene to pass the new legislation. Speaker Mike Johnson said again today he does not plan to call representatives back to D.C. until the Democrats vote to pass the continuing resolution. Another interest rate cut is expected at the end of the month when the Federal Reserve has its next meeting. But their job is getting tougher the longer the shutdown lasts because the economists responsible for generating jobs and inflation reports are furloughed. The National News Desk, Atra El-Nashar reports.
During this government shutdown, the Federal Reserve, in the middle of a highly anticipated series of interest rate cuts, is without its usual roadmap. Here was Fed Chair Jerome Powell 13 days before the government shut down.
It's deeply in our culture to do our work based on the incoming data and never consider anything else.
Ahead of the Fed's next decision on interest rates coming October 29th, they're without the bulk of the data needed to guide them on their dual mandate, maximum employment and price stability. The monthly jobs report scheduled for release last Friday is indefinitely postponed. Next week, not one but two key inflation reports plus data on import and export prices are expected to be due.
As time goes by, it will get worse. There's no question the best jobs data in the world come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We need that data. We want that data. It's going to get farther and farther from the truth. Even the private sector sources rely on the BLS data.
Clarity on the state of the economy is vital. Newly released minutes from the Fed's September meeting reveal uncertainty among central bankers, who noted that progress toward the committee's 2% inflation objective has stalled this year as inflation readings increased and expressed concern that longer-term inflation expectations may rise if inflation does not return to its objective in a timely manner. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon sees it the same way.
I'm a little more nervous about inflation not coming down like people expect. That might be a surprise. On the other hand, there's a lot of spending. There's a lot of government spending, which is inflationary too, by the way.
Currently, the Fed is still widely expected to cut rates by 1/4 percentage point at the end of the month, and then once more by the end of this year. Economists at J.P. Morgan predict that if the shutdown proves to be a long one, the lack of data could further muddy plans for additional cuts in 2026. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
You can expect some changes to your taxes starting in tax year 2026, filed in 2027. Today, the IRS announced new federal income tax brackets and standard deductions. Now, the income threshold for each bracket will be higher to account for inflation. The standard deduction will be a little over 2% higher than it is now. American farmers, especially soybean farmers, have been struggling since China slashed U.S. imports and prices plummeted. Our fact-check team is taking a look at what President Trump is planning on doing to help them get through this tough time.
President Trump is reportedly considering another massive aid package for U.S. farmers. This comes as trade relations with China remain strained and the American agricultural industry is facing the brunt of it. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So what exactly are you hearing about the White House's plans?
So it sounds like they're getting a plan together. This is all according to the Wall Street Journal, who spoke exclusively to an official familiar with this whole situation. So the Trump administration is looking at providing somewhere between $10 to $14 billion in in new aid to help these farmers who have been hit by the president's tariffs and obviously China's retaliation. The idea here is to use tariff revenue, basically the money that the U.S. collects from those tariffs, to fund the relief.
And I believe Trump used a similar fund before, but I'm curious where exactly this money would come from.
So from my understanding, during his first term, he used money from something called the Commodity Credit Corporation to send about $23 billion in aid to farmers during the last trade war, according to the Wall Street Journal. But the catch here, though, is that a Republican tax and spending bill passed earlier this year took funding from that account, so now it's not really available. That's part of why the White House is, potentially talking about using tariff revenue instead of that other account. The American Soybean Association says that farmers are really desperate for relief at this point and might not even be able to cover their production costs if things don't change with China.
All right, keep us posted on how this pans out. Emma, thank you. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to Emma's sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Well, hurricane season continues to be busy in the eastern Pacific off the coast of Mexico. Tropical storm Raymond formed today. It comes as Octave dissipated into a post-tropical storm this morning. Also still active is Tropical Storm Priscilla, which is expected to continue north and will bring heavy rains and possible flash flooding risk to the southwest. And the National Hurricane Center warns that by Saturday, there is a moderate risk of flash floods from Phoenix to Winslow, Arizona. The surrounding areas in California, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah also under a slight risk. Well, Amazon says it had nothing to do with the hundreds of blank mail ballots that were mailed to a Newburgh resident. Now, the package received by the woman says she appeared to have been opened and resealed that package. Amazon says their investigation shows the package was tampered with outside of their delivery network and was not done by any Amazon employee. Well, local and federal law enforcement continues to investigate. A U.S. diplomat has been fired for having a relationship with a Chinese woman believed to have Chinese Communist Party ties. Now, the State Department said it dismissed the diplomat from the Foreign Service after President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio reviewed the case. It appears to be the first of its kind under a 2024 policy limiting government workers' romantic relationships with Chinese citizens. It'll soon be time to say goodbye to pepperoni pizza, French fries, and other ultra-processed foods in school lunches, at least for students in California. The Golden State has become the first to ban foods with high amounts of saturated fat, sodium, added sugar, as well as certain additives from being served in school cafeterias. Governor Gavin Newsom signed the Real Food Healthy Kids Act into law Wednesday. The law requires the foods to be identified and phased out from school menus by July 2035. Still ahead, we talk to the American woman who won a Nobel Prize this week for her transformative research on the immune system. Right after this. We have reporters all across the country and your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in California, where calls for the state's insurance commissioner to resign are growing.
At a time when insurance rate hikes are spiking across California, an investigation is underway after California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara allegedly used taxpayer money for trips that included staying at five-star resorts like this resort in Alaska, costing $444 per night, or the LA Dodgers World Series celebration tickets.
What does going to five-star hotels, paying thousands of dollars for your entourage and security, have anything to do with insurance when we are not in an insurance crisis? We are in an insurance catastrophe.
We reached out to the California Department of Insurance for comment to see if there were reasons for these trips, but have not heard back.
Things are starting to sort of settle down a little bit. And
a whirlwind 48 hours. Her discovery, made in the 1990s, has been a launching point for studying our body's immune system. Brunko and two other scientists uncovered the importance of regulatory T cells and the role they play in immune tolerance.
How the body maintains a balance between an immune system that needs to recognize and neutralize things that we shouldn't have in our body, like microbes and viruses, etc., and making sure that that process doesn't get out of control.
Well, President Trump is also nominated for a Nobel Prize. The chances he'll get the Nobel Peace Prize tomorrow, right after this.
You remember we settled 7, this is number 8, we settled 7 wars, or major conflicts, but wars, and this is number 8.
Pushing for peace, President Donald Trump says he should take home the coveted Nobel Peace Prize. And that was before his peace plan to end the Middle East war was agreed to last night. The AP reports that experts in the process believe he will be passed over, as he was after his first term when he secured the Abraham Accords. And we will find out tomorrow morning. The announcement will come at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again tonight for the very latest on those hearings concerning federalized troops in Portland and Chicago and the peace plan in the Mideast war. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.